I'm clear.
Okay, George.
George is clear.
Turn the camera on. Okay. 15.
14, 13, 12.
The closings were needed because in today's environment, in the economy, these facilities were no longer competitive and therefore needed to be phased out.
10.
9, 8, 7, 6.
And then when they decide to leave, it's just tough luck. Follow us. And it doesn't matter what they leave behind.
5.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Fire.
And we're going to let the politicians know, we're going to let U.S. Steel know, we're going to let the whole country know that steel workers in Youngstown got guts. And we want to fight for our jobs.
We're still here, we're still here. Now the mills have gone away, but we're still here. With our neighbors and our kin, right here where we've always been. Now the mills have gone away, but we're still evening hangs like smoke on the steel town that I love. My thoughts, they roll and tumble through the years, and my heart dreams through the haze back to Youngstown's better days. Now the mills have gone away, but we're still here. We're still here, we're still here.
From 1977 to 1980, 3 major steel mills closed in Youngstown, Ohio. The closings left 20,000 steel workers jobless and changed the community's way of life.
This is my hometown. It's called Youngstown, and it's in the state of Ohio near the Pennsylvania boundary. In Youngstown, we make steel. We make steel and talk steel. Look down any street in town, and you'll see the mills at the end of it. There are 25 miles of them along the Mahoning River, and today they're busy day and night. Professionals here, they're all steel workers and their wives and daughters. Steel men get in the habit of doing things together, like in the mill. This is it, steel. Only a few hours ago, it was iron ore. Now it's finished and on its way to become a part of the new world it's building.
Ladies and gentlemen, the news we've received this morning from Youngstown Sheet and Tube is just the worst possible news that we as your elected public officials could have received.
At a hastily called news conference this morning, Youngstown Sheet and Tube President Jennings Lambeth laid the bad news on the line. 5,000 production employees will lose their jobs by the first of the year as a result of the decision.
You just don't know how to swallow it. It's, you hear all the rumors coming around and you still can't believe it. Now that they shove it down your throat, you just sort of accept it.
Youngstown Sheet and Tube goes, so does the Mahoning Valley. It's a rotten shame.
Most people said it couldn't or wouldn't happen. But now it's happening, and the impact will be far-reaching. Just how far-reaching remains to be seen, but it'll be bad. Bad not only for the employees of the Camel Works who face loss of jobs, but also for small industries who depend on the steel companies, such as trucking. For the communities of Camel and Struthers, whose budgets depend heavily upon the Camel Works, and indeed for all of us who live and work in the Mahoning Valley.
Doesn't look good for anybody. It's real terrible.
My wife and I both cried in bed. We have a house and we have kids, and as Mayor Hunter says, I plan to send my child to college in 2 years, and it'll never take place.
Myself, I don't even know whether I'll be working or not. 18 years, what are you going to do?
Got anything else lined up? Anything expected?
As far as a job, with 10,000 steelworkers out of work here, plus truckers and everything else, it doesn't look good.
But in spite of the announcement, there are those who are not going to take the closing lying down.
During the first week after the announcement, there were an awful lot of meetings. One of these meetings, I ran into a fellow who had the idea that, well, if, the company won't run it, why don't we run it ourselves? We know how to make the steel, and, it was just a sort of a natural solution to the problem for me.
Gerald Dickey joined the newly formed Ecumenical Coalition. This group, made up of steelworkers, religious, and community leaders, proposed to buy and operate the mill themselves.
And the vision really became one of building enough community support so that somehow we, meaning anyone who wanted to participate, could indeed buy the place.
I remember going to church meetings where they were talking worker community ownership and the choir singing the Ave Maria in the back. And I thought this is a strange setting for talking about what many U.S. Steel people, like the chairman of U.S. Steel, called a communist endeavor.
We have asked, and we are asking tonight, whether this community, all of its citizens, its skilled steel workers and their families, might create a new kind, a new form of community-owned and operated steel plant.
People weren't about to argue with something that the Catholics, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Jews, every religious denomination in town thought was good. But at least the church sponsorship took away the notion that it was somehow subversive or unthinkable in Youngstown, Ohio.
Let's send a message to the nation about steelmaking in the Mahoning Valley. Let's tell the
The
nation
Ecumenical
we're doing all we
Coalition
can to
encouraged Youngstown residents to invest in a worker community-controlled mill by opening Save Our Valley bank accounts. They also sought bank loans and federal loan guarantees to modernize the facility.
It's everybody in the whole metropolitan area chip in $100 or so and see if we can't buy it, modernize it, and run it,
The decisions about questions like wages, questions like various benefit plans, whether the plant stays or goes, what happens with the resources, the savings or profit, if you will, what happens with that, how it's allocated and distributed. Instead of being in the hands of a few who are concerned principally with making a profit, would be in the hands of those who are principally concerned with maintaining a community.
If we owned the plants ourselves and could run them, they're afraid they can't allow that to happen. This country can't allow that to happen. They're not just going to roll over and say to you, oh, yes, that's a very nice idea. We think that's a very valid idea. We think it's a very correct idea. No, they're not going to do that. Because what you would show here in the city of Youngstown, you would set a model, you would set an example in this country that would turn over this economic system in terms of how it's run.
The federal government seemed very interested in giving us monies to do studies. They just wouldn't let us do anything with the studies we did.
It involves the first time a community or worker ownership of a basic industry. You would now for the first time get into a basic industry and into an area that the establishment considered its real preserve. And that may have been the reason why the plan was finally ruled against.
And we found out through the newspaper that he said Briar Hill was going to be shut down within a year.
The Youngstown area is facing a very dismal holiday and unhappy New Year. After yesterday's bad news, Jones and Laughlin followed up today by announcing the closing of Briar Hill. This will cost 1,400 J&L steel workers their jobs.
I guess I'll have to probably relocate and find a better job somewhere else.
It makes me mad. I got a wife and 3 kids to support. But I'm going to find something. But for the guy that's got maybe 20 years, that's 40 years old, 42 years old, what's he going to do?
They have no care about the community, the infrastructure of the community, the schools, the community life, the homes, the churches. The whole life of Youngstown is being thrown aside for the sake of profit. Naturally, then we started getting ourselves together and say, what can we do about it? So we thought we'd fight to keep the plant open.
No, it wasn't a wildcat strike. It was members of Steelworkers Local 1462. The idea is to pressure the Jones and Laughlin Steel Company into reconsidering its plan to close Briar Hill.
It became part of our fight, you know. Let's not make it so easy for them to get out of town.
Steelworkers Local 1462 sponsored a rally in downtown Youngstown this afternoon to once again keep the issue of lost jobs in local steel plants before the public.
The local unions repeatedly tried to meet with the Jones and Laughlin management. Finally, their efforts paid off. A meeting was set between the company, the members of the union local, and representatives of the International Union to discuss the fate of Briar Hill.
All the company representatives were from Aliquippa or Cleveland. Highest union authority there was from Cleveland. The only people in the room who were arguing to keep the plant open were the local people working there. That the decision was in the hands of everybody who lived out of town.
The International Union said, well, you have all these benefits. Well, that's like saying, what kind of a casket do you want, you know? And,
So there was very little movement and involvement of the International Union into a total shutdown. They took the position basically that this is going to happen. And as far as we're concerned, you know, we're going to protect whatever rights that you have.
We had called a union meeting for that night to inform our members of the progress we were making. Well, one of the fellows jumps up and he very angrily pointed out the fact that the company president, division president, was speaking to a society of iron and steel making engineers at the country club. So he says, you know, if that guy won't give you answers, let's make him give us answers. Let's go up there and get him.
And it was very interesting to sit there at the meeting as I did and kind of feel the sentiment grow, hey, this is our chance to talk to the man who won't talk to us.
And finally, it was the third time somebody else jumped up. You know, the guy's up there at that country club, let's go get him. And finally Ed said, well, okay, if that's what you want, let's go.
And everybody bombed out of the meeting and got in their cars and went down to the country club and set up a picket line.
We did that for about 10 minutes, and it was cold. Okay? Somebody says, well, he ain't coming out, let's go inside, you know.
So they did. They went through the doors of the country club and into a little lobby. And they began to chant, "Where's Alan? We want to see Alan."
Well, just about the time I was convinced he made a run for it out the back door, he did come out. And when he approached the crowd, he paused and looked at Ed Mann, and he says, "Now, Ed," he says, "you know we're handling this through the union."
And as if from every side of that little area, a dozen people speaking spontaneously, came the response, "We are the union."
Hey buddy, don't you think it's time you asked us who we are? We've lived and worked here all our lives and you never asked before. You might even learn a thing or two if you listen every now and then. Hey buddy, take a good look, you're gonna see this face again. For we are the future. We are the nation. We are the people. We are the union.
But the Briar Hill thing dragged out for 2 years, and people pretty much got wore down. We had the trade benefits, and you know, people got into a psychology that it was inevitable, and let's not screw up what we have, you know.
The people who have made steel at Briar Hill for years won't have jobs after the end of this year. Jones and Laughlin called union officials into a steamy second-floor room today to announce the company will follow through with its promise to virtually close Briar Hill and lay off 1,400 workers.
On the same day, the workers at Briar Hill gave up their fight and negotiated the best package of benefits that they could, and the Ecumenical Coalition heard that it would not receive the loan guarantees necessary to reopen the Campbell Works. Both those things happened on the same day. There was a general feeling, which I shared, that hey, we're not going to win these battles. We better get ready to make a fight at U.S. Steel.
The bomb leaves 1330 union officials and workers at U.S. Steel shocked and angry about the decision to close both the Ohio and McDonald works of U.S. Steel.
When we did go down, it was a terrible blow. It was a terrible blow.
I felt, you know, as if they cut my legs off. You know, they really felt impotent. You know, I couldn't do anything about it. Nobody would listen. Nobody would even talk.
We had no idea until you turned on the TV and they said it. You know, it was no idea that was going to happen. It was a shock to learn it that way.
When I first heard about it, my son called me, told me that we're going to shut down, and I think I cried.
And then when they decide to leave, it's just tough luck. Follow us. You know, we're taking the jobs to the Sun Belt, and if you want to work, follow us. It doesn't matter that you have roots so deep in this valley, and friends and homes and loved ones in graveyards that you might like to go and put flowers on their grave on Memorial Day. You know, that kind of stuff doesn't make it. The bottom line is money, profits. And if it's more profitable to have a bunch of kids working in Juarez on microchip computers, that's where they'll take it, wherever the profits are. And it doesn't matter what they leave behind.
They announced the closing in November of 1979, right? And then I was laid off January 4th, 1980.
We always wanted to stay here because of our family. But now, if George can't find work in this community, you have to go where he's going to go.
If you lose a job, and I mean, you don't plan on moving or something like that, you plan on, you have a set pattern, you finally start developing a set pattern, and it gets thrown to the wind, you know.
The youth of the family are most of them have left town, you know, those that are looking for jobs. I have a daughter myself that's in Denver, you know, so everyone has to leave this area in order to find, and it's a tremendous strain. At least when the family stays in check, you know, you have the effect of one helping the other. But when it gets spread out like that, then everyone is spread so thin nobody can help anyone.
And I look at my own case, like I say, I have one son, one daughter. We're real close. We're probably together 4 or 5 days a week, you know. Now my son has to up and leave the area. There's no question about it. He has to stay with U.S. Steel.
For some people, it probably has to be, it's a pretty bad situation, especially if you have like 25 years in or 20 years in the mill and a family and to support, and you're too young to retire and too old to find another job. Fortunately, I'm fairly young yet, and I don't know.
It was only after very extensive review and careful review that we determined that these plants were not profitable, could not be made profitable with a reasonable amount of investment, and therefore needed to be phased out.
Sheet and Tube and Briar Hill and U.S. Steel, they're all about the same age. They are antiquated, but my question was, why are they antiquated?
A corporation, although it's a much more complex structure, is just like an individual, just like you and I. You can only spend what you have and what you have the ability to borrow. So modernization is a complete function of cash flow, availability of investment funds.
You see, U.S. Steel could have modernized. Sheet and Tube could have modernized when they were making huge sums of money and during the years when they were making a good profit. But they didn't.
This industry, through inadequate depreciation, outdated tax laws, low profit margins, environmental requirements, massive environmental requirements, has not had the funds that's needed to modernize as quickly as we would like to.
Bullshit. Don't buy it at all. That's probably the least cost of doing business. There's no reason why a man has to go in and breathe that filthy dust, dirty air of the community also. There's no reason for it. If they'd been doing their job since the 1860s when they first started building steel plants, the cost wouldn't be so great today. Let them reinvest where they make their money.
We're actually producing the steel and stuff and creating the capital to replace ourselves. U.S. Steel most recently went out into Texas and built a plant. It's a new modern plant out there. But the workers here were the ones that were the backbone for that.
You know, we woo them here with tax abatement. We make all kinds of concessions. You want new roads, new sewers, hospitals, whatever they want, we give to them. And then when they decide to leave, it's just tough luck.
Bitterness and anger spilled over many times tonight as the Ohio Works steelworkers met to talk about what the future holds for them.
And we want U.S. Steel to invest here, They can be had if your voices are loud enough.
Signs around the crowded Union Hall will be going to Pittsburgh early tomorrow, along with many of these men, to demonstrate at U.S. Steel's corporate headquarters.
We're going to let them know that we mean business.
If anything can help, I'm willing to do it.
We want our jobs in this valley, that's all. We need our jobs.
At the 62-story U.S. Steel headquarters in downtown Pittsburgh, well over 300 steelworkers, most of them from Youngstown, picketed angrily, their intent made clear by their chants.
And suddenly people were inside the building. And all of a sudden we had occupied the escalators and we were on the mezzanine. And people didn't know what to do next, but they had this stubborn feeling, we're not leaving.
They tell me that there's no officials in the U.S. Steel building. You wonder why a firm's going bankrupt? Think about it. If there's nobody in this big building that represents U.S. Steel, it's a damn shame.
Maybe if the workers started taking over the plants, they'd come down and talk to us.
Are you advocating that?
You heard me.
Hey, buddy, don't you think it's time you asked us how we feel? Us folks in Youngstown just don't think our jobs are yours to steal. There's just no way we're gonna let you take the money and run. We know what we gotta do, and it's just as good as done. For we are the future. We are the nation. We are the people. We are the union.
first taste of anything I had was going down to Pittsburgh. There was only maybe a handful of wives, I think. That's when I started thinking, that's your husband's job, where are you? So I came home thinking, well, we got to do something. We got to get some women here, involved in it. So what'd you do? Just like George said, we started the phone tree. You call a friend, I call a friend, and then you start going on saying, we're not going to let this happen. We're going to stop them from moving or closing.
Arlene and George Denny helped form the Save Jobs Committee, a group like the Ecumenical Coalition, which advocated worker community ownership.
Well, the issues were that we wanted to buy the mill. I think that was the bottom line. If U.S. Steel didn't want to make steel in Youngstown anymore and found that it wasn't profitable enough for them, that we'd do it ourselves. But you're messing around with free enterprise when you do that kind of action.
We obviously would not be interested in selling the plant to a group of people that could only be successful if they were massively subsidized by the federal government. We're not, in other words, interested in creating subsidized competition for ourselves at other locations.
So you're refusing to sell?
I would certainly not be interested in selling to a coalition that would be subsidized by the federal government in order to keep them into existence.
Roderick's refusal to even discuss selling the Ohio Works prompted the Save Jobs Committee to take direct action.
It began at a rally this morning attended by 500 persons at the local 1330 hall on Salt Springs Road. Its purpose, as explained by the Save Jobs Committee, was to keep the pressure on so that the mills in Youngstown and McDonald would stay open.
At that meeting when the politicians went on and talked for an hour and everybody was so restless, like I just feel that kind of this itchy tension. There was all these mutterings coming up, shut up, they were saying sit down, and all this stuff. Finally, Ed gets up there.
The whole country is looking at the voters, at the citizens. What are you going to do? Are you going to make an action, or are you going to sit and talk and be talked to? The action is, today we're going down that hill, and we're going to let the politicians know, we're going to let U.S. Steel know, we're going to let the whole country know that steel workers in Youngstown got guts, and we want to fight for our jobs. We're not going to fight for welfare.
And I just felt this tremendous burst of release, and everybody just kind of stood up, and the doors everywhere flew open. I looked down that hill, and I saw 200 broad backs running, jogging at a good clip in front of me. And you got down to that door, and all I heard was this crunch of steel into glass, and there was no door. The door was removed.
People were up, they were high, they felt as if they were doing something. They'd had enough speeches, they'd heard all this rhetoric, and now they could do something that might help them in keeping their jobs here.
The protest brought national media attention to Youngstown. An embarrassed U.S. Steel sent word to the workers that they would meet with the union to discuss selling the Ohio Works. After 7 hours, the workers left the building, encouraged by the prospect of negotiations. The next day, however, local union president Bob Vasquez was informed by U.S. Steel that the company would not cooperate with a worker community buyout.
I definitely think it was should have stayed. You'd notified the whole country that the people in Youngstown weren't going to let this place go without a fight. And I think it would have started something. I think workers have to be involved in these decisions, shutting plants down. And I don't mean international unions where it's in the contract, they can do it. I'm talking about the people.
I would have planned on going down again because we didn't get what we wanted. I would have been down there again or going into the mill.
I think it would have made a profound statement, that this may be simply property to a conglomerate, but from our point of view, that our job is like our property and we have a right to that job.
In a last-ditch effort, the workers took U.S. Steel to court. They asked a federal judge to order the company to either stay open or negotiate in good faith about a changeover to community ownership.
The average steel worker who is working out in those mills feels that a promise was made to him and that promise was broken. We think that is a solid legal theory. that they promised to keep the mills open so long as they were profitable. The unions made concessions. Individuals bought homes, sent their kids to college in a way they wouldn't otherwise have done, and that the company made its shutdown announcement when the mills were still in the black. What we asked for was a shot at buying the plant. And it would have been easy as pie for that judge, from a legal point of view, to say, I think there is enough here, that U.S. Steel should be required to quote a price to its workers and to give them an opportunity to buy the plant.
Local 1330 President Robert Vasquez spent the day on the witness stand explaining the concessions the unions had made because they felt the company had an oral contract with them to keep the plants running as long as they were profitable.
The whole story was told. I mean, we had the chairman of the board of U.S. Steel, David Roderick, and the vice president of the corporation, Roush. We had them all on the witness stand in Youngstown, and the whole story was told. And the bottom line was, U.S. Steel didn't want to make steel in Youngstown. They didn't spend any money here, and there wasn't anything that the employees could have done to have changed that.
It just amounted that the deck was stacked against us politically and economically. It just would have set a precedent that is not acceptable in our society today.
So the bottom line to the question, why did we lose the case, is that no one should kid themselves that lawsuits can achieve miracles. No one should rely on a lawsuit to deal with so fundamental an issue as a plant closing. The order not to dismantle for 60 days, I mean, let's tell things like they are. That was what U.S. Steel said it was going to do anyway. That they were going to keep the property intact until approximately June 30, when they would turn it over to their realty division. So certainly the door has been left open a crack. But for me to say anything other than that this is a stunning and disheartening defeat would be dishonest.
I worked last night on the same furnace as it just happened now. I haven't been to sleep since because I wasn't going to miss the last tap. I know as I walked around after it was tapped, there was a letdown, just like tears wanting to come into my eyes. You know it was the last. It's the end of an era.
Thought I'd see it like this, I'll tell you. Just it's all gone now. Not a furnace left. I guess I never thought about it. I thought I, remembered it the way it was, and it's just gone.
What can I tell you? Tell me, what can I say? All the mills standing silent, all the jobs gone away. Now the storefronts are empty as I walk up and down. But everywhere I go, I will shout Youngstown.
A community should be like a family. When a family experiences economic hard times, you don't say, well, let's divide the family. We'll send a cousin to Houston and we'll put grandma out on the ice and at least some of us will make it. That's just not what a family does. A family says, well, we'll do this and we'll do that. We'll cut the pie into smaller pieces. We'll all pull in our belts, but we will survive as a community of people.
Youngstown is reeling now. We're having problems with the safety forces, municipal employees. There have been instances where they've had to be laid off for long periods of time. They've had to work shorter hours. The city of Youngstown is now preparing to cut off street lights at night as a measure to try to economize. There are so many horror stories to tell that it's hard to catalog them all.
We have nothing but a damn scrapyard in Youngstown now. They didn't even have to clean up after themselves. You know what I mean? It's like leading your dog around through your neighbor's yard and say, oh, well, just leave that there. You know, they've done the same kind of thing.
As you view this street here, Federal Street, which was the main street in Youngstown for years, 70% of the buildings are vacant. At this time in the afternoon, when the mills were going, I used to see this sky here full of smoke. People in this town complained about the smoke. We have no more mills and no more smoke and no more prosperity.
Well, there used to be a lot of teenage jobs that we could pick up and everything, but there's really not very much you can do now. Nobody has a lot of money, you know, nobody has any money, as a matter of fact, and everything's closing. You used to get part-time jobs in them, but you can't get really anything now. You know, you might get a babysitting job here and there, but there's not very much for us teenagers.
We clean offices, and we really love it down here, only it's getting more empty. Empty.
All the stores are moving
All
out.
our friends seem to be, you know, laid off, and we're down to just a few of us. And I don't know, it just seems so lost down here anymore.
I think what I'm trying to say is that, you know, when you see tragedy that happens to somebody else, it doesn't happen to you. You know, it's just like when you charge in that machine gun, there's 50 of you and there's only 30 going to die. It's one of those are not going to be you, so you charge. And that's what happens with mill closing. It's not going to happen to me. You know, I work for Sears and Roebuck. They're never going to close this place down, you know. And when they close it, everybody's surprised and nobody's prepared. And I think what we have to prepare the people to is the fact that it can happen to them, and you better start doing something about it now and be prepared for to try to keep it from happening.
All right, council workers, that all is not lost, you know. As long as you're working, demand your rights, fight for whatever is right and correct, and don't lay down and roll and play dead, by all means, you know. We still have a union, I believe that, because the union is the people's.
I think if you could say one thing that this local did that was retain the dignity of the guys who were members of this local. You know, it may sound like a corny phrase or whatever, but I hear it time and time again. They say we went down fighting.
Every time this happens, people are more advanced on what they do. When Camel went down, there was a little effort made. And when Briar Hill went down, a little more effort. And when the Ohio Works went down, a bigger effort. You know, where we took over a headquarters for 6 or 8 hours, maybe next time.
It's sad, but it also, you know, has you seething with anger that these kind of things can happen in America. Now, this is not in Czechoslovakia or the Soviet Union or where the boogie people live. It's in America that this kind of thing has happened. And it's not just in Youngstown, it's happening all over the northeast part of the country. Youngstown is perhaps one of the most dramatic and catastrophic examples, but it's happening. And it will continue to happen unless people, you know, combine to begin to think about how to turn it around.
It's just that I know there's a lot of Briar Hills around the country. A lot of places could be saved, and if some absentee management or conglomerate comes in and says that's it, we don't need you anymore, at least, you know, take a good look at it and see if it's possible for the workers in the community to take it over themselves.
And I understand William Saroyan wrote a story that when the Armenians were haven't been quiet since they were shoved off into the sea in Turkey at just at the beginning of World War I. And they've So every place an Armenian goes, he shouts Armenia. And I sort of, since that became sort of my role, that when I went to Cleveland, had to shout Youngstown. I remember going to a jobs conference for new steel workers organizing, and there again, I decided I'd have to shout Youngstown. And I caught the Secretary of Labor Marshall on the Capitol steps, and I said to him, my job is here to shout Youngstown, you know. And I sort of sense this is still our role. But we shouldn't let the country forget what the industry did to Youngstown. The conferences in Youngstown, Stoughton Lynn's court case, it sort of made an impact on the country too, that people are wondering, at Youngstown, sure dying hard, you know, we're not, and we want to keep that up. Any place and any opportunity I get to write anybody, always tell the Shout to Youngstown story.
Shout Youngstown, I will shout Youngstown, I will shout Youngstown, I will shout Youngstown, I will shout Youngstown. The job's gone away, now the storefronts are empty as I walk up and down. But everywhere I go, I will shout Youngstown. The jobs that we fought for, the tears that we cried, a town that was stolen, but never our pride. Wherever we travel, wherever we're found, everywhere I go, I will shout Youngstown. Shout Youngstown, I will shout Youngstown, I will shout Youngstown, I will shout Youngstown.